Howdy, people. Hello? Howdy. Yes, people. Hey, man, this is super fun. Thanks for being here. If I have not met you, my name is Hunter Warner. I'm the college director here. And man, we're really pumped. I'm about to introduce you guys to our panelists, our fun people over here, incredible men and women here at our church. Really quickly, I just want to give you kind of a quick understanding of what we're doing. Lots of you have given some great questions that we're going to run through. We're going to answer as many of those as we possibly can. But I just want to be real with you. We are going to be honest, vulnerable, and just give you our advice and really respond. These aren't like clear answers, right? There might be some of these things that we might have a more firm stance on, but there's going to be a lot that we're just giving you our advice and for you to wrestle with the Lord. But man, the hope of tonight is that the end goal is that you're a faithful follower of Jesus Christ, right? We are here not just to get you married, right? Or not just to give you some quick like advice. We are really allowing for you and hoping that you would come to know Jesus more and be able to be a faithful follower of him. So we're going to talk about things, and we're going to say the real things, right? We're going to talk about sex here and there, and that's okay. We're going to say some real things. We got a whoop over here by somebody. That's great. That's awesome. Hey, this is going to be a fun conversation, but let's go to the people that we're going to be talking and hearing from. I'll let you guys introduce yourselves. I don't have to introduce you, even though I kind of want to with you, but...
Howdy. Wow, I'm sorry. That really wasn't my intention, but that was good. My name is Lindy Warner. I'm Hunter's wife. Thank you. I am a third grade math teacher, so I'm really used to talking in front of little people, and you guys aren't as little, so this is going to be great. I'm so excited.
I'm Julie Burnham. I'm not attached to anyone except for my dogs. I don't know what else to say.
That's great.
Was that a whoop or a whoop? That was it? You can hold that.
Was it a woof or a whoop? It was whatever you want to interpret it to be.
My name is Blake Chilton, and I work here with Hunter and Josh and Kathy. There we go.
Yeah.
I'm Kathy Olsey, married to Josh. We have 7 kids, 2 adorable grandkids, and I too am on staff here as the kids director.
And I am Josh, and I'm the executive pastor here, and I also work at TexAgs. And I got all those same kids and grandkids. So.
Well, people, hey, at any point, you can scan that QR code and ask a question. We will try to get to it, but again, there are already lots of questions that we're going to run through, so let's just go ahead and get started. So the first one, how to wait for dating and marriage. And so when it comes to how to date for waiting and marriage, specifically as a woman, so there might be a category of people that should maybe step into this question and answer it, yeah, go for it.
I'll take this. I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
Do you really have thoughts?
I mean, maybe after you talk.
Okay, are you going to ask the clarifying question?
Sure, go for it.
Well, we talk about actively waiting, but how can I actively wait as a woman without being the pursuer, especially as I'm outgoing? So there's a lot of people in here that don't know me, but I have a pretty big personality. So I felt pretty passionate about this question. So I think initially I would like to maybe do a mindset shift of like, what does pursuing really mean and what we are trying to talk about when we say that. And so really shifting that from pursuing to initiation. And I was like, why does initiation feel more comfortable? And then I looked up the definitions, and pursual is to follow in order to overtake, capture, kill, or defeat, to find or employ measures to obtain or accomplish, seek, or pursue a goal. And then initiate is to cause a process or action to begin, to cause or facilitate the beginning of or set about going. And so I think as a woman, and specifically as one that has a bolder personality, who's gone through a lot of counseling, who recognizes that I am a good initiator of conversations and just relationships. And so leaning into that and not being fearful of that. And so I think that mindset shift of like pursual it's different than initiating. And so I think really getting, as a woman, being like, it's okay if you initiate those conversations. It's okay if you initiate a date if you want to do that. Because there's purpose in the way that God has created us, and our personalities. And of course, our environment and sin has impacted those, sometimes in negative ways. But I think really leaning into who the Lord has created you to be. And I think with this, thinking about any relationship, whether it's romantic or not, but I just want everyone to think about like your best friend and that friendship and when it started. Can you remember which one of you was the first person to initiate that first hangout? And I bet most of you are probably like, no, I don't really remember. Or you're like, yeah, it was me, but then did you continue to initiate everything after that? And it was like, no, the other person had an active role in that initiation and pursual. And so I think really shifting that mindset of being willing to put, both people putting in the work. Because I don't think that anyone should play a passive role in any relationship, whether it's friendship or romantic. And both individuals should be pursuing not only each other, but pursuing the Lord. And that pursual is going to ebb and flow over time. Sometimes one person will do more and initiate more, and then it may transition and shift. I know I've seen that in a lot of friendships.
I'll go real quick. This is just a little fun story about initiating. But when I decided that I liked Hunter, which was a fun time, and as my third grade teacher self, I love to sing. And I'm not good at it. It's not like a skill. This is not like a humble. I'm really not. But I texted Hunter and I was like, can we talk later? The worst. But when he called me, I sang to him and I said, I have feelings for you. For real. That's a true story. And now we're married. So ladies, you call your man, okay?
I think too that was real. That was a real confusing time for sure. In that moment, though, some backstory, I had initiated and pursued Lindy a lot and got that no over and over and over. And so that door was really closed for me to initiate in. And so if you're a lady in here and you might have closed that door, but your feelings are kind of changing, you're going to have to express that they're different, right? And that's an okay thing. I think the biggest push that I would have is if we look at the Bible, you see that in a godly relationship, there is this male figure that is supposed to lead in that relationship. And so when it comes to leadership as a male, and you can dive into all that, you look into Ephesians 5, there's a lot to it, but for the sake of time and what we're talking about right now, what I want to push for you is when it comes to male leadership, if it's not there in the beginning or at all, don't just expect it's going to come later. Right? And so that leadership doesn't mean that it has to look like a specific way. He has to have this amazing plan and like ask you out in the perfect way. At the same time, if there's no initiation or pursuit of you, don't assume that later when he puts a ring on it, that's going to change. Okay?
I'll add to that.
Yeah.
So ladies, like as you're thinking about like, if you want to initiate a date or and I would be specific about a date, obviously, like asking somebody out versus like entering into a continual relationship, but just being mindful about setting expectations of if you start out by you're the one that's initiating everything, all the dates, all the hard conversations, all of that stuff, it can really set a tone for that relationship moving forward to where if a guy is a more of a silent leader or willing to take a step back, then it can become the theme of that relationship. And so being really mindful about if that's something that you want. I have friends that have all different types of marriages. I'm thinking about one couple in particular, and the wife is the go-getter and she's the initiator, and her husband, the way that he leads is very different than a lot of other couples, but she really has to temper that initiation in order to give space for her husband to step up. And so for those of us that have bigger personalities, it really is sometimes just being silent and seeing if they will take a step forward.
Anybody? You got something, Blake? Go for it.
I can always say something.
That's good.
I think just clarity is key, and that's with any relationship. And so I don't think there's any problem with a female setting her and going, and you're putting yourself at risk a little bit here, but to go, hey, I have feelings for you. I'm not going to beat around the bush. I'm not going to be weird. This is not junior high. I have feelings for you. If you want to do something with that, let me know, and let's talk about that, and we can hash that out. But just I want to set that forward. And guys, I think you should for sure do that as well. Now, not on the first date. That'd be kind of weird, or the first time you meet them. But I think you spend time with those people, and you go, hey, I think this could be someone that I could be interested in. And you go, hey, could we go to coffee? I've been hanging out with you and seeing you at church and at this place and that place, and I like the things that I'm seeing in you and who you are. I would love some more time with you. Could we go to coffee and just get to know each other better? I think that's a great way to do it. But just setting those intentions and being very clear up front on what you're trying to do and what you're about. I think that's key. So
That's good. Guys, if you think that the girl doesn't know what's going on, that's probably on you. And so clear it up. It's helpful. It's good. Be honest and open. Let's run on to the next one. The next question, how can I balance desiring a godly relationship and truly wanting that while also putting that in his hands and stepping back?
There's a number of these questions that I felt like, having been married, we've been married 26 years, and so a lot of them either took a shift of perspective of thinking back, or thinking of some of the desires I've had. We have, as we said, we have 7 kids, and thinking for them and how we've hoped for them and tried to direct them. And additionally, there's some that are perspectives that I just think are hard for me to get. And so I asked some other friends this week, and specifically a single friend of ours that we've watched walk in her singleness for 2 decades. And I asked her specifically about this question, and just because I've seen her wrestle with this desire to be married, and that not be her reality. And I've seen it over decades in a really beautiful way, like a real sincere way. And in response to this question, she was like, well, while she understood the nature of the question, she was like, really trying to approach it as a balance isn't the right approach. It really is like full submission to the Lord. And if you come to the Lord asking and praying for something with a conclusion, an answer already made, then you're not really submitting to the Lord. And so to come before him and being honest, and I think that's the balance really the question was really getting at. And I do encourage you to be honest before the Lord. There's no reason not to be. He wants that from you, for you to be completely honest in how you feel and what you want. But he wants you to lay that before him and say, whatever you have for me, Lord. And in that, to really, really believe in his goodness and believe in his desire for you to live an abundant life in him and have a richness of life.
I would also add, so I am 37, have wanted to be married, have a family for, my entire life, and that is not my reality as well. And so, like Josh was saying, the Lord has to be our relationship with the Lord, and the gospel has to be our baseline and our foundation for everything in our lives. So not just this specifically, but for everything. Where you work, where you go to school, what your relationships look like, everything. And I think also remembering too that every believer has been called to the same thing. That core, that foundation that we're talking about of just that, think about the Great Commission, thinking about, like the greatest commandment, which is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And the second is like it, to love your neighbor as yourself. So whether you're male, female, married, single, dating, any of those things, that's the baseline and that's the foundation, and that's what we should all be striving towards. And so there has to be this release of saying, like, Lord, I trust you with all of it. And because he's either in control or he's not. And either you trust him or you don't. It's an all or nothing. And I think specifically when you're in college, when you're getting close to graduating, this becomes this thought of like marriage and wanting it, and it's the next step. And it's like, well, it may be the next step for you or it may not be. The Lord has called us all to different stories. And there is a majority of things that happen to a lot of people, but that may not be you. And so, but the Lord should be at the center of everything that you're doing.
That's good. I think that leads into another practical way, or a way that we must work through this, is through prayer. And someone asked, how can I pray about a future relationship, and when do I know I'm ready?
I thought, I won't reference this friend of ours all night, I promise. But she gave these first few questions, she gave such beautiful responses. And, and her response was talking about how we pray for things before the Lord, and to really do that in an honest way. And her response is like, this is a want that I have carried my whole adult life. And for me to put it in its rightful place before the Lord means I can't come. She didn't feel like she could come before the Lord and pray for it every day, in every hour. It actually, that isn't a submission before the Lord. That's her kind of exerting her will before him. But she says she puts it before the Lord as it's a long-standing want and desire, and he knows it. And she to let it sit with the Lord means I'm not going to pray for it every single day, but I'm going to trust that the Lord knows it, and he's going to allow to put it in its rightful place in my life. And I just thought that was a good, not just for marriage or anything, but for any of our wants. If we so orient even our entire prayer life around asking the Lord, in our asking, almost like trying to force him to make it happen in a sense, it isn't true submission. And I thought it was just a beautiful lesson for us, how we pray before the Lord.
That's good. Let's move on to the next one. I think it's a good one. What is your advice for someone who is single?
Okay. I actually asked some of my friends about this, and I asked it in the way of, you're looking back at your younger self, and what's something that you wish someone would have told you if they had known, or if you had known that your story, 15 years out of college was going to be the exact same as it was when you were in college. What would you tell yourself? And so it was really interesting, because I asked 5 different friends, and the theme was pretty similar, which is like, your life doesn't start when you're dating or you get married. And I think that is very cultural of, let's say, the church, Big C church, and then we get more granular into the South, and then we get even more granular into Texas A&M University, and then more granular into Christians at Texas A&M University, that it is something that I think is expected, and it's just kind of like, that's of course that would be your next step after college, and it may be, but regardless, like really being who you are and being sensitive to what the Lord has called you to, because back to that baseline and that foundation of like, your focus should be on the Lord and on the gospel, and all these other things we should hold loosely. And so as you're praying about those things, it really should be a, Lord, I trust you and thy will be done. And I think also too, like just saying like, it's okay. It's okay that you're single right now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now, 20 years from now. One of my really good friends that I actually met on a random vacation, she's in her 60s and single and loves her life. And she has been an encouragement to me of not waiting for marriage in order to really lean into what the Lord has called you to do. So like my friend Danielle, she was like, stop waiting for it and focusing on it and just live life. She was like, I would have taken more risks. I would have traveled. I would have moved, whatever. I can attest to that. I didn't start doing all of that until probably 5 years ago. Another friend, she was like, it can be very easy to be told and feel like life starts once you're married, or you're starting your life when you're dating. And even the more we see singleness and honestly probably marriage, like we have to be asking ourselves, like we need to be learning about ourselves, our desires, our walk with the Lord. Like that's truly what's living. And because those things are important whether you're in a relationship or you're not. And I was just really proud of her. She was like, I'm not like saying like I'm not less of a person, and I think this is specific to a lot of females. Obviously I'm not a dude, so I don't know that perspective as well, but that like we're not less of a person, we're not less of a woman because we're not married. And she was just like, I'm really proud of the life that I've created for myself, and like I can say that of myself now, and that's not to say I don't struggle. There are certain days where I'm like, man, sure would be nice to be married. But I think just being comfortable with like who you are and being sensitive to what the Lord is asking of you and being obedient and taking those risks and do the things that you love. And I remember it's so stupid, but I really wanted Fiesta ware, which probably no one in this room knows what they're. It's a specific type of plate. Anyways, and I see all my friends getting married and they have all these gift registries, and I'm like, I don't get to get any of that free stuff. And so I was like, well, I'm just gonna wait. I'm just gonna wait to get these plates until I get married. And then there was this point, it was before I was 30, and I was like, screw that, I'm getting the plates. And I bought them, and I have loved that every day when I go into my cabinet, I see these turquoise plates, and I'm like, I chose that for myself because this is my story, and it's a good story. I don't understand it, and I may never this side of heaven, and I have these desires, and I don't know why I still have them because sometimes it would be easier, I feel like, if they would just go away, but they haven't. And this isn't the only desire that I have, but like it is, and I am surrounded by, I'm 37 and I live in College Station, Texas. 98% of my friends are married with children. And that's not a bad thing, but it also is hard to be different. And I think being comfortable in that and just being like, I matter. My life matters today. And my friend Sarah, she was like, don't let your friends treat you dishonorably because you don't have a spouse. Speak up for yourself. And if they don't listen, let the Lord handle it. And that is something like you have to be an advocate for yourself. And there are times when I have to be like, actually, Hunter knows on Sunday, I came to him and I was like, do you have a single person on your panel? And he was like, no. And I was like, I think you really need to consider that. And so going back to like being who the Lord has created you to be. And marriage is a good thing, but it is not everything. And I feel like I can say this pretty confidently. The church at large has idolized marriage because it is the majority that happens for a lot of people, and single people are often forgotten. And so we have to advocate for ourselves, and you're not alone. It may feel like you're alone. You're not alone. You're not alone today, and you won't be alone 5 years from now, 10 years from now. We do exist. There aren't many of us, but I feel like we should make t-shirts that says I'm old and single.
I'll say this, the Bible talks about singleness is a gift, and to Julie's point, like the church needs to begin to see that as a gift, and that starts with you guys seeing your season, whether that's 2 years, 20 years, whatever, to go, hey, this is a gift from the Lord. Like, I don't need ring by spring. That's not biblical. But to go, I want to use this season not only for my own development, but for the development of other people. Because when you're single, you have more time than you will when you're married. I know, like, you guys feel like you're busy, and you feel like you've got a lot going on, and I'm like, I would love to have an afternoon where I didn't have anything to do, where I'm not running kids from this practice to that practice and taking kids and doing this and having hard conversations with my son or daughter, or doing, staying up till 9:30 doing kids' homework. And I mean, there's just so much that you don't have any idea. And so to use that freedom that you have and to use that flexibility that you have, and Julie mentioned it, but I want to highlight it, of just this season where you can really focus on like your own development. When I got married, I was an absolute idiot. I mean, ask my wife, ask my friends. I didn't really know myself, to be honest with you. And so that made marriage, the first couple of years in marriage, really, really difficult. And my wife and I were both like, I wish we could go back and just go, hey, I need to get into counseling. And I don't even know why I need to be in counseling, but I just need to be in counseling and have some older, wiser people go, hey, why are you doing this? What is your thought process here? Why does this continue to catch you and trip you up? And just have older, wiser people that were just asking really pointed questions. And I just didn't use my singleness well. I ran from it. I hated it. And so I just tried to get really, really busy so I didn't have to think about how quiet and lonely and all of that I was. And I really missed an opportunity that God was going, hey, this is a gift for you. Whether, like I said, whether it's a year, 2 years, 20 years, whatever that might be, because you're a gift to the church. Like, I look at so many people in our church, people like Julie, people like Melissa Silva, who's one of our deacons at our church. She was up at the office this week meeting with Bree and just kind of walking through some neighbor stuff. Our single people, and really college students, it speaks to you guys too, have the ability to serve our church, and not just our church, but serve people in an unbelievable way. There are so many times that I'm like, oh, I wish I had time to go and do this or do that. And they're like, oh, well, I already went to the hospital and sat with them and I made them. And I was like, I don't have time to do that. I'm raising 4 kids and doing this and and so using that season, whatever, and seeing it as the Bible calls it, really a gift, and going, okay, God's given me this gift, I'm going to use it. And then if I get married, praise be to God, we'll go into that season. But anyways, so.
No, that's good. I think in a book called Emotionally Healthy Spirituality, Pete Scazzaro says that in dating, you get to show the gospel with the width of your love, how it can spread out a lot of people. And I think that is so often missed, like Julie said, within the church. And like Blake just mentioned, that there's so much that people can show and love and care for when you don't have to focus on this other person. And so that's a unique season for you. And then also, I just want you to, it probably is something you missed, when Julie was like, hey, marriage isn't everything. Every single one of us really nodded our heads. And we're married, and we love being married at the same time. It is not the end-all, be-all. Like, your life, like Julie said, is not over. One of the sweetest things, I want to move on from this, but really quickly, when I got married, I had marriage. Blake makes fun of me all the time because I stopped working out after I got married. But I had marriage as like the pinnacle of my life. Like, I needed to get married. And then once I got married, it was this weird thing where the Lord really clearly showed me that and was like, hey, this isn't everything I thought it was going to be. And in that moment, it could have been shell-shocking, right? It could have like made me just go everywhere. And Lindy is a wonderful, incredible wife and partner. It's not her. It was this, I had this expectation. And the Lord was like, man, that is not what this is. I am so much better. And it was a sweet time for me and the Lord. But at the same time, lots of you might feel like, hey, once I get there, my life will be complete. It's not true. That is a false lie from the enemy, 100%. Anything else before we move on? I know I kind of like said some things, but sweet. Hey, we're going to move on to our first dating question, which is on dating unbelievers. Is that okay? Can you, someone just, well, we have some people who have strong opinions. Hey, should you date unbelievers? What advice would you give to those who are or have friends dating unbelievers? I love the honesty in the room, people.
I thought you picked it up. I was like,
I'll pick it up. The answer is no. Just to be really clear, and I can say that from experience, RIP BC Lindy, but it really, sorry. It is so easy to convince yourself, even if you are a believer, that this person will change, or it doesn't matter that much, or we can be different, or they go to church a few times a month, and we just convince ourselves of, honestly, these lies. They're lies that we justify to make ourselves feel better. But the reality is that when you get into marriage, these feelings that you have when you're dating aren't the same. Like, marriage is great, and Hunter is my best friend in the whole world. But if he didn't know Jesus and he didn't pursue me like Christ pursues the church, our marriage would be really rough. Like, feelings wouldn't be enough. And I think it's so easy to convince yourself, you're like, no, but I love him or her, and it doesn't matter because they might come to know Jesus, and I'm missionary dating for the kingdom. And it's like, wrong, okay? Don't do that. It's just, you miss out on so much sweetness that the Lord has for you, and you put yourself in a situation that marriage and life and pursuing your own walk with Christ is actually going to become way more difficult.
Yeah, I'll say this, not to belittle the question, especially because I loved the response, and I think that's great. We could probably move on. But I would just say that in Kathy and I's desire for our entire adult lives to pursue the Lord, one, to believe in the Lord's goodness and his promises, that being a core motivation of my heart and my life. But to pursue that in our marriage, to orient raising our family around that, to orient the ministry, the work of my life that the Lord allows me to do in ministry. I don't mean ministry in the church. I just mean for the kingdom or for him. And to receive his blessings, all of doing that all together with my wife, it makes no sense that we wouldn't have the same core of Christ in our motivation. It doesn't even compute. And so I would say if your goal is to live a life where you're pursuing to know Jesus more, to look like Jesus and to do what he does, to be a disciple of Jesus, it doesn't compute to merge yourself with a person not on the same path. It won't help, it will hinder and rob you of what the Lord has in that blessing of marriage.
I'll add to that. Marriage is hard. It's difficult. I can't imagine being married to someone who doesn't think of money the same way that I do, raising kids the same way that I do, how we spend our time the same way that I do, how we die to ourselves and live for Jesus the same way. I can't. Marriage is so difficult as it is. Two people dying to themselves to become one flesh is so incredibly difficult. I can't imagine marrying someone who doesn't have the same master and Lord telling them what to do. And so I do want to give a little bit of biblical context to that. One, over and over and over in the Old Testament, God told them, hey, don't date foreign women. All right, we can't take that out of context today and be like, all right, that doesn't mean you can't date, people from China or people from Mexico. That's not what that means. What that means is that they were following foreign gods. And so you have this blazing example in King Solomon, the wisest dude on the planet. Wrote Proverbs, okay? The wisest dude on the planet. And guess how he fell? By marrying women that were foreign, that followed foreign gods, because he started following their gods. And so that's just one blazing example right in the center of Scripture. But then you see Paul talk about don't be unequally yoked. And some are like, well, that's not really specifically talking about dating. But the principle is the same, that they would yoke two animals together, and those animals needed to be equally related to each other in size and temperament and all these things. Otherwise, they're going to try to go different directions. And the same principle is in business, right? That's why if you're in business with somebody who's not a believer, you should probably think, hey, this is going to be problematic. Paul talks again in 1 Corinthians 7:39 when he's talking about marriage and remarriage, that he says you marry somebody only in the Lord. So over and over, all of these things are pointing to this. Again in the New Testament, Ephesians 5 talks about the point of marriage is this mystery that is the gospel. And every wedding that I ever do, I talk about that very thing, that your marriage to one another should point people to the gospel. That's real hard to do when you're dating or marrying somebody who doesn't believe in the gospel. And Lindy talked about like missionary dating. I don't know if that term is popular now, but people are like, I'm going to missionary date them. Jesus does not need you making out with somebody so that they can get into heaven. All right, he doesn't. He doesn't. We appreciate your participation in the kingdom's work, but he doesn't need that. He doesn't need that. And you can be a friend to that person without making out with them, without whatever, in order to get them into the kingdom, right? You can bring them to church or be like, meet me at church, all right? You want to date me? That's where we're dating. We're going to date at church, and you're going to sit over there, and I'm going to sit over here, and we're not going to touch each other.
Every Sunday.
So, yeah, every Sunday. Sundays at 9, 12:45, and 5. That's when you can date me.
That's good. Real quick.
Yes. So I think this question is assuming that this dating is continual. So yes, all of the things of don't date non-believers, all of that. But I will say this, that a lot of times, especially as you get older, we make a lot of assumptions about people before we really know them well. So I think the caveat of it is okay, and they may correct me or disagree, that to go on a date with somebody not knowing not knowing what their relationship status is with the Lord. This is given, maybe you just met this person, maybe you're on a dating app, maybe there's a lot of other things out there. So I think if you are in relationship with somebody as a friendship and you're watching them and living their lives, you have a good indication if they're a believer or they're not a believer. Maybe they've confessed it to you. If you know that information, obviously don't go on a date with them. But if you don't know that information, it's okay for you to go on a date and ask those clarifying questions. Try to get to know them, understand where they're at in their relationship with the Lord. Because I think a lot of times as believers, we're so quick to just be like, whoa, we're so serious. And I think it is something to be serious about, but it is a date. You can go to dinner with somebody and ask questions and get to know them and understand them. And honestly, it's really good practice and you getting to know yourself and being able to explain yourself and your relationship with the Lord and why that's so important to you.
Absolutely. I think in the Texas A&M Christian culture, dating is this thing that you do when you know that you can marry them. And I'm like, man, that's just not how it is. Dating is an evaluation. So just like Julie said, man, you are evaluating, hey, do we work well together? Do I even know you? Do I like you? All those things. So I think you can go on a casual date with someone and, man, you can find out really quickly through a lot of questions if they're really a believer, right? Like, hey, where do you go to church? Oh, I haven't found one yet. Man, you've been here 4 years. What do you mean you haven't found one yet, right? I mean, that's going to show you really clearly. If they start to say, yeah, they really love Jesus, I'm like, I think there's a lot of red flags right there, right? So for the sake of continuing on, what to look for in dating and marriage is a great question, which is the next one. That works really good. What do you look for in dating and in marriage? And there's 2 follow-up questions. How to determine the difference between healthy desires, aka attraction, and then also what Scripture says to look for in a spouse. At the same time, when considering dating someone, what are the things they need to have if you're wanting to pursue a Christ-centered relationship? So those questions, overall, what to look for in dating and in marriage?
I can go again. One, attraction does matter. I feel like that's a big thing that people always ask.
Thank you for saying that.
All right, that is pride right there, baby. That is pride. Attraction is not everything. It does matter. And I think a lot of people skip over it. Sorry, just kidding. I think a lot of people skip over that and they're like, no, either you focus too much on attraction and you're like, oh, he's tall, dark, handsome, and plays football, he's mine. Or we focus too much on spiritual and
She just described me, people. Very clearly, sorry. Go ahead, you're doing great.
I'm sorry. Anyway, or you go to the other side and you're like, I can't worry about attraction and I need to just find someone uber spiritual and it doesn't matter if I'm attracted to them. There's really a healthy balance. Attraction matters. You're about to spend the rest of your life with this person. I hope you like looking at them. That feels like a win. Like, we want that, you know what I mean? But two, we need to focus on what are the things biblically that we should be looking for. And I think so often we are like, what should I look for in a godly man that looks like in dating? And really, I think we should just be looking for a godly person. I mean, you look in Romans 12 and it talks about the marks of a true Christian, and it's talking about love being genuine and outdoing one another and showing honor and being consistent in prayer and patient in tribulation and, just over and over, not paying evil for evil. Like, if you see someone doing these things in their daily life, you don't have to worry about, are they going to be a great boyfriend? You get to see there's someone who pursues Jesus really, really well. And so even if they have flaws, I know that daily they're going to try to look more like Christ, which means they're going to love me well. And so I would say that's one thing to look for.
One more? Anybody? One more? Sweet, no more. Let's move on. Hey, there's more stuff to go through.
That's
There's
all right.
lots more.
I'll give you something.
Oh, thanks, Josh.
I tried not to think too deeply on this, honestly, this question, just to give you just an initial. I was thinking of this even for my kids, like who would I desire? Knowing, having been married for long, what would I hope they would see as traits in someone that they would want to date and then one day marry? And I think many of them that Lindy just read from the scripture, pursuit of the Lord on their own, like it's not attached to you or a desire to be with you, but they have a genuine pursuit of the Lord. And you can see that in many characteristics, whether it's a prayer life or whether it's service. To see them care for the people around them. And I would say specifically the people that are hard to care for that are around them. I just think this is a good tell of someone's capacity to selflessly love. So that could be, I don't mean they have to do this perfectly at all. I mean they're striving to do this. So that could be their family, that could be, a sour roommate or whatever it is, but see their capacity and their desire to love them well. And in that, a consistency of putting other people before them, I think is a trait. It's absolutely required for a healthy marriage to do that with your spouse. And so you should see their desire, again, to do that and to grow in that. And then just generally, I know this is it's not black and white, it's very gray, but I would say if you're going to date somebody, you want to know that they are a healthy person, spiritually, emotionally, mentally. That doesn't mean they have to have it figured out, but you want them to be at a place where they're healthy enough to engage in dating, because it is something that you're doing with intent. And just like if somebody physically wasn't well, there's certain activities they wouldn't do. So I think you want to do your best, and like Julie talked about, this takes some getting to know them. You can't just always evaluate this from a distance. And then the question, did we read the one about balancing healthy attraction and these things? Yep. And I just wanted to say that one thing that's so important about not diving all in with physical and emotional intimacy is because it becomes very hard to see these things and judge these things when you're just giving into your attraction. And I think part of that, I know that if you've grown up in church, you've heard the phrase guarding your heart 1,000 times. And I think that can be hard to understand sometimes, but part of it is this intentional guard of just giving over to your attraction, because it will blind you from these things, these traits of character and godliness that you're looking for. You'll either be too forgiving of them or you won't even see them because you're blinded by your affection. And so I think that amongst other things of purity and what God calls us to, there is this need to, you want to be discerning, and you can't do that as you give over to your attraction.
Real quick, Julie, real quick.
Really quick? Okay. This is why it's also important to be in community, because it's not just what you're seeing of this other individual, it's what the others in your life are seeing. So what do those people that you're in regular community with, what do they see? What do they say? Because this person could be acting a certain way in front of you, but they may be acting differently around others. And back to you could be blinded by how beautiful they are.
Tall, dark, and handsome, people. Tall, dark, and handsome. Gosh, I can't wait to hold on to that for a couple weeks. That's good. I love you. Hey, let's move on to the question that so many of you have asked. So many of you are excited to hear about. How far is too far, right? What is the best sexual boundaries for me and my boyfriend? There's lots of other ones that go with this. I'll just throw them out there and we can kind of walk through them. Again, where can I draw the line in physical touch in a dating relationship? How far is too far? Is it okay for me to fall asleep with my boyfriend if we're not having sex? All of these things. What is the best sexual boundaries in dating?
I'll just initially say there's not one right way to do this. There's not a formula. I feel like there's, at least when I read these, there's this heart of how far can I go until I say it's too far. And I think the mindset needs to shift, and it really needs to be like, what is the Lord asking of us? And what does the require of every believer? And he's real specific about sexual immorality and lusting and all of those different things, and that's a heart matter. And it may play out very differently outwardly for others, and so it's not this works for this couple or for this individual, and therefore it works for everyone. So I would be real quick to be real careful about just even the question and like how far is too far.
Yeah, I'll tack onto that too. I used to ask my youth pastors that all the time. Hey, how far is too far? How far can I go with my girlfriend? Some of that was because I was a little whore growing up, but what's crazy is Kathy and Josh knew me growing up, so
We're
they
being
could be like, yeah.
honest here, people.
So what's crazy is that they would always like talk to me about these lines and all these things. And what Julie, like as I was a youth pastor, I would answer that and go, hey, you're asking the wrong question. The question isn't how close can I get to the edge of the cliff without falling off the edge of the cliff? That's not the question. The question is, what does it look like for me to please God in this relationship? What does it look like for me to honor this young lady in this relationship so that when she gets married to me or somebody else or whatever, she doesn't have regrets about my relationship. And so that's the question that you've got to be asking. And I think that I'm not against like, hey, are you kissing your boyfriend, girlfriend? I know that in Christian bubble culture at A&M in times in the past that's been like, hey, you don't do that. I don't think that's a problem because I think it's a hard shift to go, hey, we're not kissing at all till we're hitting the sheets, right? When you get married. Like that's a hard shift to do when you're like, hey, we haven't even kissed. We sort of held hands when nobody was looking, and then now we're married and we can have sex all of a sudden. So I don't know. I think it goes back to what Julie said of just really seeking the Lord, of going, hey, we're not going to cross those lines. Like one of the things was, is it okay for me to fall asleep with my boyfriend if we're not having sex? I mean, is that like the greatest sin if you fell asleep on his couch? Probably not. Like, I don't know that the Lord's like, you little sinner, right? But if you're continually doing that, like it goes back to the heart issue. Are you planning on doing that? Are you putting yourself in that situation 1 time, 2 times, 3 times where all of a sudden you're not just falling asleep and waking up at 3 a.m, you're actually doing more than that? I think you've got to be honest with it and have community around you, like Julie said earlier, where people go, hey, I've noticed this is not just a one-time deal, but it's happening more and more and more. What's going on? So,
One to like even the not everything is or everything is. I don't know,
Permissible.
Yes. Yeah, that thing. So also, considering that of just because you can do it doesn't mean you should. With all of these, I would be like, okay, what's the benefit, or why, the question of why are you falling asleep with your boyfriend, and you're like, what is the driving force behind that? Is it to feel connected? Is it to feel loved? And because those are the heart issues, and doing this one thing may, for that time period, make you feel connected and loved and all of those things. But if it ends, or when it ends, or any of those things, like, that's not, you need to be looking for those desires within the Lord. And yeah, it's just, I come from also, during college, it was very much so like the purity culture and Joshua Harris and, boy meets girl. And there was like, this is the line, and don't ever cross it. Don't ever kiss. It's going to be perfectly fine when you get married. And I think in every relationship, you have to also look at that other person when you get to that place, and you have to ask the question, what is too much for you? What's the heart behind all of this, and like, what do you need? Because the other person also have to, because they may be struggling with something underneath that you have no idea about, and they're not confessing. And so asking those critical questions and being like, this is how I'm feeling, this is how I'm thinking, this is what's hard for me, and talking about it. Like, the Lord created us to be sexual beings, and so these desires are normal. And so just talk about them and make them, less taboo.
Yeah, I think all that was said is so right. I think the idea of trying to find a line so that you can just say, well, that's, as long as I'm on this side of it, I'm good, is just not the goal. It is to be righteous and honor the Lord in that. And so part of that is wrestling with it. And I think we all just want to know, can I do this or that? But to really wrestle with it before the Lord and ask these questions like Blake was asking, but honoring the Lord, honoring this person. I think it also, it's kind of like, asking, how much can I drink? And if I'm answering that to an alcoholic, I may say one thing. I don't know if this is a good analogy, but I'm just thinking through it as I'm thinking. But it might be one thing to someone who really struggles with something, and they may have to really flee any temptation. And I think that is a good thing. That's strong character. That's not weakness. That's strength of character to say, hey, I struggle with this deeply, and I'm going to flee from it. And 2 Timothy says, is that instruction. So flee youthful passions. And that passions isn't just wanting something. That's like lust. That's those desires. And pursue righteousness. And so fleeing something that that you have just this overwhelming temptation for, or you've failed many times, changes the answer, I think, for you as you sit before the Lord. And it's not always about what the outcome of it is in physical act. Some of it is about your heart. So in Matthew, we know that God talks about looking at the heart and the lustful intent. And so just because you didn't go too far that one day and you kept your line doesn't mean it wasn't sin. It didn't fill you with this lust. And so if wherever you're drawing your line is filling you with greater lust and desire, then I think you've gone too far. And I think you sit with that before the Lord and say, where is it that I honor this person? I can express my affection, but not burn and incite this greater desire.
I think in that, just to give you a couple quick practical things that and again, my opinion, falling asleep next to your boyfriend, girlfriend, when Lindy and I were dating, she passed out all the time. There is, if you want to go look at my Instagram, I have this
Don't
is not a
go
plug.
look at his Instagram.
This is not a plug for my Instagram. This is to make fun of my wife. If you go look at it, there is a little thing. I'm not like Instagram person, but it says Sleepy Lindy. And if you click on it, there's like 70 photos of Lindy asleep around me, and they were all within a year. I mean, it's crazy. What I do think is probably a good, healthy boundary is staying the night. If that's what you're referring to, or if that's what you're thinking, I don't think that's a really good idea. And the reason is, where is that going to continue to go? What is that familiarity going to bring? It's probably going to be deeper and deeper sexual sin. And that's kind of what Blake talked about, and I think that's just put that really out there. I don't think that you should stay the night with someone, and to be honest, I think when you don't do that and when you get married and you stay the night for the first time, it's really, really sweet. And that's not to condemn anyone who has stayed the night with their boyfriend or girlfriend. It will still be a really sweet thing, marriage. There's so many things that you get to experience with one another, but I do think that line is really there. Another one, I think if I were to ask you and we all took a poll, hey, if take your biases aside, maybe you're more towards maybe the freedom route or the more towards the legalist route. If I was hey, put those biases aside, give me your straight line, where do you think is too far? We would probably all be around the same area if we just gave our honest kind of thoughts and opinions. And so I would just say, hey, that honest thing right there is if past making out, there's probably no good grounds for doing anything past that. I don't think you could really argue that well. If you could, I would love to hear it. That would be a really interesting argument. And so I think with that, again, the goal of what we talked about, the heart is your biggest issue. If you're trying to take from someone and satisfy yourself, you already have an issue right there, right? Go ahead.
Yeah, before we move on, Jackson brought up a good point that I think a lot of people struggle with is the difference between lust and sexual desire, and they're different. And if I'm being really straightforward, and it sounds kind of harsh, but I know because I've lived it, a lot of times the desire that you have for your partner before marriage is lust. It really is. And we tell ourselves, we're oh my gosh, we're so close to being one, and I just want to be intimate with them because it's even closer, and we justify it that way. And I'm telling you, it is lust. And I know that because in marriage, sexual desire is so different. And it's good and it's beautiful, but it's different because it's an intimacy thing. Whereas before you're married, you're just so excited to be sexual because like Julie said, we are sexual beings, but there's a way and a time and a space to do it. And before marriage, most of the time I would argue that it is a lustful desire and not a desire for intimacy with your partner. Just a thought.
That's good. We're good to move on. Hey, when it comes to other boundaries, I think this is something, especially within the Christian culture at Texas A&M, that is kind of wonky at times. What are good boundaries when it comes to spiritual boundaries and emotional boundaries in dating? There was a follow-up question to this, which was good. To what degree, if any, should spiritual leadership be present in a dating relationship? Kathy, did you say that you had a good thought on this? Yes.
I do. Thank you, Hunter. Yes, I think this is a really big one, especially in the society that we're in and the Christian bubble that we all are fortunate or unfortunate to live in. But I think, one, it's really great to know how the other person is going to lead you spiritually. As a woman, as a girl, it's really hard not to seek that out as the top priority and to lean into that and want that so much. But I feel like it's really important to guard your heart when you're dating, and it can be so easy to that become just an idol for you. For me, growing up here in Bryan College Station, when I got to A&M, I was surrounded by hundreds, thousands of godly college men, and they all were pursuing the Lord, and it was amazing. And it just was, sorry, we were laughing. I went to Central Baptist. We had a very large college department.
Josh is 1 out of 1,000, by the way, guys.
1 out of 1,000. Let's go.
Anyway, but just to see that and to not have experienced that as a high school student, to see all these guys pursuing the Lord, and that was so attractive to me. And I could have just jumped and been oh, that guy's pursuing the Lord, that's for me. That guy's pursuing the Lord, that's for me. So to just hold that and to not let that be a big part of your relationship, to let that be somewhat of it, but to not idolize that, and to be able to guard your heart and say, yes, we want to be both walking with the Lord. We're going to walk together sometimes. We're going to walk separately sometimes. But I definitely feel like that's an area we as girls can get caught up in and get blindsided by. That's just such a beautiful thing to follow somebody that's pursuing the Lord. And we can sweep under the rug other things that may not be the best thing. So that's my thoughts on that.
I'll add this too, because I feel like a lot of girls are saying, hey, I want a godly guy that can lead me. And I'll just take all these dudes off the hook. Most of them have never led anyone. Like they're 18, 19, 20 years old, 21 years old. So they're not going to be leading you like some 50-year-old dude's leading his wife. Does that make sense? And so I wouldn't look for, hey, can he lead me spiritually? I would look, hey, can he push me? Can he prod me? Is he leading anyone else? Is he serving in college ministry or youth ministry or kids ministry? Is he discipling other dudes? Is he leading anywhere else to go, rather than just go, how does he lead me spiritually? Leading you spiritually doesn't mean like he takes you through a Bible study every week. That's just not what that looks like. Some of you girls would love that, all right? I've got friends. I've got a dude, I kid you not. He would stand at the edge of his bed every night and read the scriptures over his wife. And when they were telling us this, my wife looked at me and she's like, if you ever do that, I'm going to punch you in the face. And I was like, okay, noted, right? And I guess she just doesn't like my preaching. But anyways, but just to like lower those expectations to go, hey, I'm going to give this dude some grace. He probably hasn't led a lot of people spiritually. But if he's pursuing Jesus, if he's pursuing to be under people that are leading him and trying to lead people, I'd be like, he's on the right path.
Yeah, I think that's really good. I think when it comes to leadership, Lindy and I kind of walked through this ourselves. A lot of people, especially in Texas A&M, you're like, hey, can I like talk about the Bible at all with my boyfriend or girlfriend? I'm like, yes, please do. Like, see if that dude can like knows his scriptures, right? Be like, yeah, I'm reading in Isaiah 53, right? And be like, how does he react? Like, that's super weird, right? Like, work through those things. I think one of the biggest things going back to kind of boundaries when it comes to like, hey, how do you pursue those well? Because it's good to have those. How does that practically work? If you're not praying or encouraging one another to pray towards and for those boundaries, and then also I would even say praying with one another for those boundaries, it's going to be really, really hard for you to have the power to not like go all in sexually with this person, right? And so I think a really cool opportunity that someone on the outside of the Texas A&M bubble for Lindy and I, it was her aunt, was like, what do you mean like they say that you can't pray together? That's weird. And often, that's kind of what people talk about. Like, hey, don't be too spiritual with one another, which I think that's a good and right thing. That doesn't mean like you can't share your faith with one another. Like, how are you going to evaluate if that brother or that sister is actually like working towards being like Jesus if they're pursuing those things? Go for it.
Yeah, and maybe this is taking it a step too far, but I'm just going to be honest. I feel like so often it's we don't want to cross spiritual boundaries, and I want to be really clear. There was not one time that Hunter and I prayed together that I left and I was like, I want to jump his bones for that. Like, it just doesn't, you know what I mean? Like, that's not how prayer
Lindy
works.
has weird sayings that she gets from her parents.
People say that.
No one says that.
I do think women do have to be mindful about their emotional attachment. And so you have to know yourself well enough to know, okay, if I'm constantly having, praying with this person, in a quiet room by ourselves, like it's not just the, I want to jump their bones, but the emotional attachment, because you're not married yet. And you do not know if that is where you're going to end up until you're married. And so you don't know. So you just always have to be mindful about, that thinking about if this doesn't lead to marriage, I'm a part of this person's story and they're a part of mine and everything that happens, both physically, emotionally, and spiritually.
Man, there are so many things I want to say, but we have to move on. Hey, there is one question I don't want to move past because I think it's really good. What advice would you offer someone who is the significant other doesn't have a desire for purity? What advice would you offer someone whose significant other doesn't have a desire for purity?
They probably don't have a desire for Jesus.
Yep.
I mean, if they're not desiring that in some level, like I'm not saying they don't struggle. I'm just saying if they're not have some sort of desire at some point where they're like, no, I really want to be pure for the Lord. I know that's what God's will is. 1 Thessalonians 4, I get that. Then I'm like, they don't really want Jesus. So,
Yeah. If they're not willing to sacrifice that in their lives, they're probably not going to be willing to sacrifice much for Jesus or for you, is what I would kind of say for that later. Man, let's move on again.
I just,
Please.
I was looking through my notes earlier today trying to find this definition I heard once of purity. I did find it. It was, purity is a well-ordered life in alignment with God's intentions. And so I think just echoing here, if that's not what someone wants for you or with you, that I think is your answer of what to do next. So.
That's great, Josh. Kind of moving on into some more purity questions. Will marriage fix a lust issue? Will marriage fix a lust issue?
No. Anything else? Lust is primarily a heart issue. And so changing your circumstance does not fix your heart. I would also say, just going on that idea of purity that I just mentioned, like if your desire is for to pursue God's intentions, that is true, would be true in all circumstances. So that should take place before you're married and after. I would also say this, could be a tangent, but if you are really struggling with lust, and almost like many times guys specifically, but girls too, do in an addiction, and you create a habit in your body, and many of you know this, that you just, even in those thoughts, you can physically change your body and create a habit that takes serious attention, and the Lord can heal you from anything. That isn't to scare you to say that it's unsurmountable in any way. You take it seriously, that this is a sin that if you let it run rampant in your body, will physically change your body. And you work with the Lord and Spirit and other tools that are at your disposal, meaning inside mental and emotional health, that help you overcome that. But that isn't just going to flip a switch the day you get married. And to treat it without that seriousness, I think, could lead into trouble, bad places.
Yeah, when even just to kind of hit it where this is probably, whoever asked this, probably something that you're thinking of, when it comes to pornography, if that is something that you struggle with and you kind of hope and kind of your last desire is, marriage will fix that, that is a lie. That is a true lie. And that is encouragement for you to focus in on not wanting to prolong working towards and giving that to the Lord and working through that habit that is in your brain, that is this addiction that is going on within you. Marriage is not going to fix that. Just like all these other things, like marriage does not fix your sin. If anything, it reveals more of your sin, being that close with another person. And so just because you're able to have sex doesn't take away your lustful desires. And so the push that I would have for anyone in the room that would feel that way is, one, make sure you're working through that with some accountability. Specifically, if you need accountability for when it comes to pornography or anything in that realm, at Declaration, we have a class that's starting up actually for, it's called Emotionally Healthy Purity class. Specifically, we have a guys class coming up. We've offered girls classes in the past as well. But this coming Monday, or maybe next Monday, we're starting a class Monday night. And these classes, they work through and they have this accountability to work towards working against that and working towards looking more and more free. And to be honest with you, there is freedom in that. Lots of people talk about, hey, freedom in that is struggling once a month, or freedom in that struggling every 6 months or once a year. There is freedom from that struggle. So don't trick yourself into thinking marriage will solve it, or that once a month or every 6 months or a year is okay. work towards true freedom that's offered in Jesus Christ through the power of the Holy Spirit.
I just want to add one other thing. I hadn't really thought through this, so y'all forgive me, but there's this idea with lust, and it could be more than just about sex and physical attraction, but there's this idea with like giving over to lust that you want and you pursue something outside of, that you want to fulfill you outside of God's design and plan for your life. And that could be in the area of sex. It could be about anything else in relationship too. It could be about just the relationship itself. Like you could idolize it in a way that it's going to fulfill you, that you want it more than anything beyond what God's placed for it. And if you bring that, this is my caution that I'm trying to get to. Bringing that into your marriage will only create greater hardship for your marriage, because you trying to put your husband or your wife to fulfill things that God doesn't, that aren't for you, aren't promises from the Lord, aren't necessarily even the way the Lord wants to fulfill that in your life, will put a pressure and a demand that will cause hardship, right? Will cause difficulty in your life. And so I guess just speaking against this idea that just getting married will fix those things, I think can cause more trouble in your marriage. So.
That's good, Josh. Moving on, how do you forgive yourself for impurity in a past relationship? How do you forgive yourself for impurity in a past relationship?
I would love to talk on this one. This is hard. It's hard when you were not a believer and you enter into a relationship with sexual baggage and sexual sin and full vulnerability, just because I know there's probably some of you in here that have experienced the same thing. I wasn't a believer, so before I met Hunter and before we got married, I had sex. That was Hunter. I was not a virgin coming into our relationship, and that was really hard, and I carried a lot of guilt and a lot of shame, and I was really concerned of what it was going to do in our relationship. And Hunter was very gracious, obviously, because he understands what Scripture says. Romans 3:23, to start there, like, all have fallen short of the glory of God. Like, we've all sinned and fallen short. And so I brought that sin in, but we both brought other sin in. So it starts there, but then two, like, I have been made new in Christ. And so there was a really beautiful part about walking into, dating and engagement and marriage, knowing that I had that sin, but also knowing that I have been washed clean fully by the blood of Jesus. And my past sin actually had no holds on our relationship or on who I was or my value or my worth. And so you forgive yourself by looking to the cross. Like, you have been forgiven by Christ, and you have been washed clean by Christ, and no one can take that forgiveness away from you. There's just overflowing grace.
Yeah, I echo that, absolutely. I think the heart of the gospel is that we're not defined by our sin. Like, our identity isn't in our mistakes, our identity is in Christ. Like, that is the heart of the gospel. And we embrace that in this real way. Two other thoughts I had on that is to mourn the consequences of your sin. Like, there are consequences to not doing what God set up as the way that's going to breathe life in you. And I think it's just like any other sin in any other area. I think part of accepting God's grace is mourning the consequences, not punishment from the Lord, just there's consequences. And so I think that is a really vital part of that. That's part of Kathy and I's journey, and we did not have a healthy dating relationship, and this was one of the ways. And for many years in our marriage, we have mourned the consequences that it meant for us relationally, and what it brought into that. And then my third point is just believing that God's goodness, like what he's got for you today, is better than anything you can imagine, and you can't mess that up. So while you may mourn a specific consequence that from your sin, don't ever think you're going to miss out on God's goodness. His goodness, like starting from this point, is beyond anything you can imagine. And Kathy and I got married. The timeline for us getting married was because we got pregnant. And it was the most shameful part of my life, just kind of displayed for everybody, displayed for the people. I was in church. I wish I had Lindy's story if I didn't know the Lord, but I did. And so just the ugliest part of my life that I wanted to keep hidden was displayed for everybody when I was 20 years old. And it felt in many ways like such a potent failure that I thought I had robbed the rest of my life of goodness in certain areas. And sorry, I'm getting a little emotional, but the point is that my family, my 7 kids and my marriage is like, I believe in my heart and from the testimony of people around me, is like the banner of God's goodness in my life. And so that came from just this horrible place of shame and sin for both of us. And God has redeemed it in ways that I just never thought imaginable. So believe that your identity is in who Christ says you are. You're his child and he loves you and wants good things for you. Mourn the consequence and then believe in the goodness of God he has for you.
I just want to tag on to that because I agree there are consequences. There's always consequence for sin, and it is hard. But I think a lie that I believed for a long time was that going into marriage, our sex life would be bad because of the sin that I brought in. And I know that's the way a lot of people feel because it's so shameful. And I just want to speak a lot of freedom. Like Josh said, the Lord redeems things in really beautiful ways. And so there are consequences, and they are something to mourn, and they are hard. But that doesn't mean that the Lord can't make something beautiful and good out of our sin. Like all things that were meant for evil, he uses for good. And we see that in Scripture. And so I just want to say that encouragement too.
Yeah. We're wrapping up at our time. We have maybe like 15-ish minutes, but I want to say something. There's another question, and the question, it really is something along the lines of, hey, how do I deal with a relationship if the other person has lost their virginity, and like and regrets it? How do you work through that? Man, I would say for me, working through that with Lindy, what I saw really clearly is any time that I struggled with that wasn't on Lindy. That was on me. That was on me having some expectation that she was supposed to be perfect, that she was supposed to be perfectly clean. And man, looking back at that, anytime I struggled, that was because of, man, I had this persona, and sure, there was baggage that we worked through, but I would say 99% of the time, it was not me working through the baggage, it was me struggling with the baggage and blaming Lindy. And that's not okay. And so for you, if you're working through that, the thing is with marriage, you're choosing that person because of who they are, fully been redeemed in Christ, right? We've talked about this as a person who is hopefully a believer. You're choosing that person and who they are in Christ, and regardless of what they're done, you are saying, hey, I love you because of all the things you've done and because of all the things that you wish you didn't do. I love you, and I'm choosing for you to be my best friend, and for you to hold this expectation, especially with something that they probably regret. Man, for you to be an example of grace and love and truth, because the Lord has no condemnation for them. The Lord has zero condemnation for what they have done, even if it was when they were a believer. You have no more standing on that, even if it was before they were a believer or after, because the blood of Jesus is for eternity over all of them, over all their sin. And so for you, what I would recommend is look at your heart, because if you think that you are perfect, it is the story that Jesus talks about in Matthew 5 for you,
that you are looking at that person and you are saying, hey, get the speck out of your eye when there's a huge log in yours. And there is working through baggage, and there might be some difficulty, but man, there is not if there is the comparison going on, it is a wrong judgment, and Jesus talks really clearly about wrongfully judging people. Y'all got anything? Okay. Let's see. Let's keep going. Hey, is sex scary if you wait until marriage? It's it's a fair question.
I loved this question. I thought it was
I thought you were
fantastic.
going to say, I love sex.
I do. I also love this question. My answer would be maybe. And I think that's beautiful and wonderful. And to figure that out with your spouse on your marriage night is a beautiful thing. So, love it. I thought it was a good question.
I would also dive a little deeper into that to go, is there something to your fear? Like, is there some traumatic thing that's happened to you? Maybe you were abused. Was sex seen as bad or wicked or evil in your house? I would just try to like process that with some people that know you and love you and care for you, or maybe a counselor, and just to go, hey, is there something in that? Or is it just like fear of the unknown, and you're just like, I've never done that, and so, and that's okay, and I think that's where Josh is going. Is it pure? But it could be something deeper.
Okay, I want to share a funny story, but I feel like it helps, hopefully, because I think that we have, maybe this is wrong. Ooh, we're about to get personal, baby. I feel like we all have this expectation when we go into marriage and we're about to have sex, and we're like, it's gonna be crazy, and like the movies and whatever. And I had sex before, and I was still scared going into marriage because Hunter and I hadn't had sex. Like anytime, there is gonna be some fear because it's new and it's different, just like anything. If you have sex outside of marriage, it's probably still gonna be a little bit scary. Like it's new. But to give y'all just a picture of it not being perfect, on our wedding night, this is personal, on our wedding night, we get to the hotel and I'm so scared, and it was really sweet, and we walk in and there's roses and there's all this stuff, and then there's a charcuterie board. God bless. And I was so anxious, and I was like, one, I'm so sweaty because I just danced so hard and I need a break. And so I was like, you go away and I need some time. So he left. He was gone for maybe 10 minutes, y'all, and when he came back, I had eaten half the charcuterie board by myself. And that's how nervous I was. And then sex was still good and beautiful. And so it's okay to be scared, and it's okay to be nervous, and it's okay to not know exactly what it's gonna be like, and it's okay to eat half the charcuterie board because the Lord can still bless it, okay?
I don't know how to move on from that other than just going to another question. That's fun. That's good. This is what this is for, right? Just honest vulnerability. Oh, man. Time and things. Okay. This is a good one. Let's go to that one. Sorry. How long is a good enough time to date before marriage? How long is a good enough time to date before marriage? One follow-up is my boyfriend and I have different timelines. I feel like God is telling us to get married sooner than my boyfriend wants to get married. What do we do?
I was joking because earlier I said 37 weeks is the answer to how long you wait. But I'm just kidding. I just made that number up. Yeah, don't write that down.
There's not a formula.
No, there absolutely isn't. So it's kind of an impossible question to ask. I do, as far as like a timeline, time-wise, I do think the follow-up question is what I was really addressing of just, marriage is a commitment and a covenant, and it represents God's covenant to his people. It's like something that we walk into confident. And so if someone's not ready to get married, they shouldn't get married. Like that should be a thing that we shouldn't be pressuring either way. If it was reversed in genders or whatever, that should, shouldn't be a pressure. I think specifically from this idea of God telling you it's time to get married and someone not being. I think God is not a God of confusion, so He's not going to tell one and one the other. You know, He might speak more clearly, but I think I would really wrestle with God telling you that and what that really means. I think God does speak directly into our lives. I believe He can and does do that. He also gives us lots of agency and presents opportunities and urges us. And so I just want to be careful with this idea that God's telling you to get married right now. And just make sure you're really sitting honestly before the Lord. And like we've talked about before, putting that before other people and counsel, godly counsel, and being gracious for the other person. So I think it's a hard question.
I'll say this, just having older people that have been married, just like getting them involved in the process. I know that sometimes you guys can get into a vacuum or you're asking people that are your roommates or your friends or whatever. There's something to going, hey, we have older people in our church that have been around the block, and we even have a premarital counseling ministry. KK over here, hey KK, raise your hand, girl. Yeah, so she kind of helps lead that. KK would love to sit with you and your boyfriend or girlfriend and just go, let's talk. Like, what is that? Why are you dragging your feet? Why do you want to get married so early? And just have a conversation, because there's so much stuff that can come up through that. And those are good, healthy conversations. I know for me, I needed my wife to kind of push me, because I was playing Peter Pan. I mean, I wanted to be a boy forever and just hang out. And so I needed a woman to go, hey, man up or I'm gone. And I was like, all right, let's do this then. But, you know, just having older people that can step into it and just have conversations and go, hey, can we take y'all to dinner one night? Can we go to grab coffee with you guys one day? Can we come up to the office and chat with you? And just having some eyes on that. So.
And I would say something that also speaks to just your dating relationship is making sure that your relationship is with other people, that you are in community with other people, because then it's really easy to, like, you're not having blinders and being like, I'm ready to get married right now, and they're like, I'm not ready. But for you to be able to put that in front of your peers and the people that you're spending time with and say, do you see any red flags? Do you see any reasons why we shouldn't get married? Do you think there are issues that we need to address individually together before? And if you're not dating in a way that you're not doing that in community with other people, then you're shutting out so much of the opportunity for the Spirit to speak and move and change you and your relationship together.
And believe it or not, we've had people come through our church that everybody in their community, including our premarital counseling team, have said, y'all don't need to get married. And they still got married. And they got a divorce months later. So listening to your community and going, oh, okay, maybe they have some wisdom. Maybe they can see into this thing.
That's good. Okay. This might be our last question, which is sad, but we are getting to that time. In my only other relationship, we spent a lot of time together. In this relationship, we struggle to find time to be present with one another. How much time is too much for dating? What is the minimum required to have a healthy relationship?
The first part of this question, there's two questions here. The one, there's like this example of someone spending too much time, and there's another part of this question talking about, like, is there enough that they have to sustain a dating relationship? So I just want to address really the first half of that, because from my experience of seeing people, one, it was my own experience, I'll be honest, but also seeing others over the last couple decades, it is often true that dating couples spend too much time together. Like, that's my opinion. And what I say that because I see it almost in sometimes like stifle the work the Lord's doing in each other. Because the Lord is going to work with you in so many ways to grow you. And a lot of that is through discomfort. And we shouldn't just be comfortable all the time. And so man, my daughter was even telling me this back just 2 weeks ago, just about how without a boyfriend, like there's so much more that when you're uncomfortable, when you're lonely, and maybe God's prodding you to build a relationship, but instead you just turn to your boyfriend, right? Y'all know the example I'm saying, like what I'm trying to say here is it's so easy to use that relationship as a crutch and ignore the urges the Lord is doing in your spirit, in your heart to grow or take another step or serve or build into another relationship. And so it's not that you shouldn't spend time together, but you shouldn't do it in such an automatic way that you are stifling the Lord's work in your heart and in your life. And I think you should be on guard for that. Now, there's obviously, you could swing the other way where you don't have a relationship at all. So maybe one of y'all could speak to the other half of that. But from my experience, I just see too many times dating couples stifle the work the Lord's doing in their heart by just being together all the time.
I would say if you struggle to spend time with one another right now, that might be something that is kind of a flag, right? Because there's a difference in like, hey, when we hang out, I don't have fun, and there's a difference in spending too much time with one another, right? I did go on some dates with some girl, BC Lindy, and it wasn't BC Lindy, it was BF Lindy, I guess, before Lindy. Anyways, we're trashing it. Anyways, I went with this girl, and we were dating for a little bit, and then at one point, I was like, we were hanging out, and I was like, I'm so bored. And I was like, well, this is not a good thing. And so I ended it, right? Like, as you should. So if y'all aren't, like, jiving with one another, again, marriage isn't going to fix that. It's not like spending more time with one another is all of a sudden going to be like, this is great. At the same time, there is this boundary of, if you're not having your friends around you, if your friends are like, hey, we never see you anymore, you shouldn't get mad at them and be like, why do you not want the best for me? I found my person. Maybe you should take a step back and be like, oh, maybe I don't spend time with you at all anymore, right? Those are things, and oftentimes we get defensive because we're just wanting to hold on to what we see as good. Oftentimes we should be, again, looking at what the people around us are saying that we, before this person, trusted and gave our lives to be like, man, you speak wisdom to me. There was one time that one of my buddies, I was like, hey, anytime I'm straying off, like, you have the say, so tell me when I'm going wrong. And then he told me one time I was going wrong and going too deep with some girl, and he was like, hey, bro, you shouldn't do this. I'm like, hey, get out of my way right now. And that did not go well. I needed to take a pause on that, but I didn't want to listen to him. And so in those moments when you invite these people into your lives, which you should have people speaking into those parts of your lives, listen to them. Let those people actually have a vote and a voice in your life. Anything else? Okay, last little fun question for those in the room. I thought this would be a fun one to end on. Will you share some fun date ideas? Aw, right, so sweet.
Can I say not necessarily a fun date idea, but what I think is a great date idea is I think that you should be serving people together. I think you as a couple should be out doing service, whether that be together in church. Thank you, Caroline. Whether that be together in church, whether that be just in the community. I think that's so important for you to experience each other in that way and to learn what it's like to serve alongside each other. So there could be lots of fun ways to do, but I think that's a really, really big, valuable dating thing you should do.
Okay, I'll do one. Hunter is a really creative date planner. It's so beyond me. Congratulations. That's the one right there, okay? He really is so creative at planning dates, and that's just not my gifting. But there was one time, and I was kind of cranky because it was in the morning, but I got over it. But he came over, and we did this thing where one of us was blindfolded and we were making pancakes. And so the one who was blindfolded was making the pancakes and the other one just had to tell you how to do it, which is a team building game I do with my third graders. So I was like, we are 5, but this is great. And it was so fun and it was silly and we just had a great time. So gentlemen, if you want to impress your gal, make pancakes with a blindfold. I don't know, that sounds weird, but y'all got me, okay?
This is not going to check the box of fun date idea, but I just wanted to balance out because that was really weird. So I'm going to give maybe something a little more normal.
I'm hurt by that.
I know.
I think 90% of accidents happen in the kitchen, Hunter. It's not very safe.
I was just the encouragement to, when you're dating, not to just to entertain yourselves, like not just to do fun. I think there's a place for that, but like it doesn't have to be this thing where you're just constantly entertaining, but to make sure a good number of your dates are where you're really getting to know one another. I think that's Kathy's example is like serving together, I think is great. But even, having been married 26 years, like our best dates are just where we get to talk and we get to really share life in our heart together. And it can be over something that you love. Like Kathy is a foodie, she loves food. So like us just going out to dinner and getting to talk for an hour and a half is like a perfect date because it feeds our knowledge of one another and our desires and our values and sharing those things together. So I just think as you're dating, that's what you should be looking for, and don't just entertain yourselves all the time. So
I'll add to this. This isn't a fun date. I'm not Hunter Warner or anything, but just seeing your significant other in other places, whether it's serving, whether it's with their friends or your friends or his family or her family or their cousin, or like seeing people in different spaces, seeing them in church, seeing them at school, seeing them at work. You just kind of get a whole 360-degree view of them. And you don't just see this romantic side where it's real creative and fun and, all of these things, but you get to see them on a bad day, see them in all of these places. I don't know. I just think that's really helpful. That's not very creative or fun, but whatever.
Well, shoot, these are Christian answers. If you want to throw in prayer after you make pancakes, that's good too.
Okay, I'll give you a couple quick things as apparently some random expert. One, if you're the dude and you're planning the dates as you should, first date, what you should absolutely do is in asking all the questions of this girl, pick out those things that you hear. Oh, she likes to read. She likes to be outside. She likes to X, Y, or Z. And then plan the second date around the things you learn that shows you're actually listening. Yes, amen, ladies, amen. And so, one, continue to listen and continue to learn them. That's just a sweet thing. Random fun date ideas. Go to a fun place. Get a disposable camera from Walmart, take those pictures and be like funny random pictures with like sculptures and all this stuff with the disposable camera. Then later you go and like take that film, get it back a couple. This is something you should do when you're like gonna be with one another and you're kind of a little more confident because you're gonna get those pictures back later. That might be like a little hurtful if it doesn't work out. That's a fun one. And then second one, if you got some good roommates and that will like help serve you and they're kind of fun, you can have them be like chefs and like waiters. I did this thing in my college house. We were the Cub house, so we had all this Bear stuff. We're the Cubs, and so I said, hey, we're gonna go to a fancy restaurant, Lindy. Dress up super nice, like we're gonna go out. It's gonna be great. I went, picked her up, and then I drove her all the way back to my place where my guys and I like set up this whole room. It's like all decked out as like all this fancy stuff. And it's a college house. It looks gross, but like we're making it work. And I had made like menus and I had them dress up as waiters and it was great. And I had like this menu set up and we called it Casa de Cub. It was awesome. And then from there, at the very end, we did like, we said it was her birthday, even though it wasn't her birthday. So I was like, hey, just come up with a song, like a birthday song, and like some random stuff. So they grabbed all this stuff, made her like stand on the chair and like sing this happy birthday song with some cake. It was great. That's a fun one for sure.
Hey, people, we had a great time. I hope this was a blessing for you. Can we give a round for our panelists? Man, again, the hope of tonight is that you, in being single, seeking to date, waiting on the Lord, seeking to be married and enter into engagement, all that stuff, that you would be faithful believers of Jesus, seeking to be submitting your whole life to him, right? And submitting into the faith and the knowledge that he is best, right? Over all things, his word, his ways are best. And so hopefully that is a blessing for you. Man, this was fun. We will probably do another one of these in the spring, but just a quick little thing for you guys in the room that are interested. In a month, we will have, as a college ministry, we have 2 things coming up. One is our Reach Night. We'll go on to campus, and we will do a prayer walk and hoping to just also share the gospel with people, pray for people. That's going to be coming up soon. And then also we are going to have a college night of worship, which will be awesome. Well, apparently you guys love worship and you're like, about evangelism, but we can talk about that later. Let that sit with you. Let that sit with you. But it's good to be excited about worship, and what's great about being excited, I really like Jesus juked you there, huh? What's good about being with worship, we're gonna do something a little bit different. We're not gonna be in this room. We're gonna maybe go and be outside. We're gonna be out at this beautiful property, maybe that someone on this table owns, like the Olseys over here. So more news coming out later with that. That's gonna be at the end of November, but hey people, thanks for being here. You guys are sent.